To talk about the superannuation changes in the federal budget, we're joined by money whiz, financial columnist and best-selling author Noel Whittaker, direct from Brisbane. Noel, what are your immediate thoughts on those changes in the budget? What really stood out for you?
Well, what I really like, Tracey, is there is a commitment to raise the compulsory superannuation to 12%. That's the only way the average battler can ever get ahead when they retire. It's absolutely essential. Even though there are those on the other side of politics who want to stop that, I think it's essential. The average person, the average lower income person cannot save for themselves. The only way they can have a secure retirement is if the government saves the money for them. Paul Keating was telling me the story last week about a woman he met in the street with 2 Aldi bags. And he said, "Where are you going, love?" And she said, "Well," she said, "Mr. Keating, I'm going to see my daughter who's been deserted by her husband. And these groceries are for her kids and herself. And thanks to you, I've got $440,000 in super and I can do it. So thank you." And that's the kind of people we need to take care of.
It's a terrific anecdote, particularly because there has been a history of tussle within the coalition about increasing the super guarantee rate, which of course was legislated. What about other changes, for example, removing the $450 a month that was required to receive the super guarantee for people working for one employer?
Tracey, it's a no-brainer. It should have been done many, many years ago. It's the same as the work test. I mean, the work test is crazy. Anyone who knew anyone in business could get around the work test. I think the fact the work test is now being abolished for people up to 75 is great. It's obvious, but it's not starting for a year. All these things have got a time capsule on them, so it doesn't start until July next year. It should be starting July this year. But what's got me going is all this hype about the downsizing contribution. Like all the press is saying, "Isn't it great? We can now put the contribution in at age 60. Well, we're going to contribute to age 67 anyway. We don't need a downsizing contribution to contribute. The average superannuation balance for most people is about $500,000. Now, the only thing stopping people from contributing after age 60 is if they've got 1.6, but it's going up to 1.7. So will be $1.6 to $1.7 million in super now. If you haven't got that, you can make a normal contribution. A couple could put 2 chunks of bring forward non-concessional contributions for a total of $660,000 without needing the downsizer contribution. Really, the downsizer contribution is the cream on the cake for the wealthy, because it only benefits those who've got more than 1.6 million now. And also, don't get this hype about it's releasing housing stock for first home buyers. I just don't see that the average retirees downsizing home is what the young ones might be after.
That's a fascinating analysis, particularly on that downsizer contribution, Noel. There's been a lot of reportage around that. One other area I'd like to ask you about is prior to the budget, there was talk about the government mandating employers and, of course, government super contributions for people on paid parental leave. And that wasn't mentioned at all. It was obviously scrapped. Is this something the government needs to look at?
Look, there's been a big thing for years that women don't have as much superannuation as men. I went to a conference a few years ago run by the women economists of Griffiths. You know, I spent a day with the industry and a lot of female economists debating why women don't have enough super. Basically, it's because of broken work patterns. It's because they tend to cluster in lower paid jobs like machine shops and aged care. It's because a lot of professional women, because they're smarter than blokes, choose shorter hours. That's why GP doctors working part-time. Most vets now are female. Many women are choosing, which is great, to work shorter hours and earn less money. So if you earn less, your superannuation's down. And the main recommendation, apart from the fact that the women economists felt that women are less engaged in them with their money, that's fact, is that what the main recommendation all of us had was that all women should be in growth option from day one unless they opted out. Because they said many women went to the more conservative option and therefore didn't get what they could have had. It's not a simple issue.
So what you're saying is there are multifaceted ways that the government could encourage changes to the way women contribute to superannuation, as well as those structural inequities in the system.
Yes, and also it's a very sad thing that the most vulnerable women in the community, the over 65s with no house and no super. And they're the ones who really do it tough. And that's a combination of all sorts of things. It could be domestic violence, relationship breakdowns, businesses going broke. There is no simple answer to this. Really, I think it's education.
Okay, Noel, thanks very much for your time today.
Thanks, Tracey.